think about how do we service our customers, most companies do it incorrectly, and they say, well, here's what we have to sell. How do we sell it to people? And that's the wrong approach. The right approach is to figure out customer needs. Right? What does our customer actually need? Not just on a functional level, but also on a psychological level. That when we do that, if we stop short and we only think about, this is what we have to sell, how do we sell it to people, we leave out all kinds of interesting opportunities that if we're not careful, a newcomer will come and capture those opportunities away from us. Whereas if we start at the psychological level, if we understand their base needs, what I call these internal triggers, then we can come up with much more creative solutions than just saying, well, this is what we've got, how do we sell more of it? And so that's really an important place to start, is by understanding that all products and services, in fact, all human behavior is motivated by this need to modulate our moods. Right? It's really about changing our emotional state. And when we understand that, then we can find solutions that we may not otherwise bring to market. We can be much more creative about the solutions we're offering. So there's a lot of different ways to find a customer's internal triggers, what I call these internal triggers, these deep psychological customer needs. And I describe in my book, Hooked, about some of these techniques. There's a technique called the 5 whys technique, where we start with the functional product and we keep asking whys until we figure out the psychological need. Now, this is a process that came out of the Toyota production system to find manufacturing defects, but it turns out it's a great way to understand consumers' deeper psychological needs, right? So if we say, okay, why do they use our product? Why? 5 times, what you end up getting to is this psychological state. And that's where we want to start with our products and services. So if you're building a product that you want people to use on their own with little or no conscious thought, out of habit, you want them to use the product because they want to, not because they have to, you've got to be able to answer these 5 fundamental questions around the hook model. So the hook model starts with a trigger, to an action, to a reward, and finally an investment. And the 5 fundamental questions you have to ask yourself is, number 1, what's the user's internal trigger? What's the itch that drives the user to use your product when they feel that emotional sensation? Then you've got the external trigger. So what's the prompt in their environment that tells them the next action to take? What's the ping, the ding, the ring, whatever it might be that gets them to take that key action? Eventually, you will no longer require those external triggers. The real products that create habits no longer require that external trigger at all. It becomes solely triggered by the internal trigger. Then you've got to ask yourself the action phase of the hook. The next step, you have to ask yourself, what's the simplest behavior the user can do to get a reward, to get relief from that discomfort? Then comes the variable reward phase, and here the question is the reward fulfilling and yet leaves the user wanting more? And then finally, the investment phase is, what's the bit of work that the user does to increase the likelihood of the next pass through the hook? And it's through these 5 fundamental questions that customer preferences are changed, that our tastes are formed, and that our habits take hold. If a product is a single-use type product, you don't need habits, right? Now, there are some competitive downsides to that. If you don't form a habit, then typically products that don't form a habit, it's not necessarily that they're bad businesses, it's just that they have to compete on different elements, right? They compete on price and features, and you're constantly competing with your competition in that regard. Whereas when a consumer forms a habit with the product, when it's a product that's used with little or no conscious thought, kind of in the way we might use Google, for example, you're not asking yourself, I wonder if Bing is better. No, you just use it, you just Google it because you use it habitually, and that is a huge competitive advantage.